Have you ever stopped to ask yourself if being a good person is actually setting you up to lose in life? Pause for a moment and think, really think, about your journey so far. How many times have you done the right thing, only to be invisible, in the end? How many times did you speak with honesty and were met with condescension or silence? How often did you step aside, offer help, give freely, and then watched someone colder, more strategic, even ruthless, walk away with the reward you hoped would be yours? You might have grown up clinging to the belief that the universe favors the virtuous, that fairness prevails, that if your heart is pure and your intentions noble, life will eventually return the favor. Your parents told you, be kind and good, things will come. Your heart whispered, do good and good will find its way back to you. But now you're older. You've lived, and somewhere along the road, you started noticing the truth no one warned you about. It's not the kind-hearted who thrive out there. It's the ones who know how to lie with a straight face. The ones who don't lose sleep stepping on others, to climb. The ones who turned charm into a weapon and turned empathy into a mask they wear only when it serves them. And still, here you are, trying to be decent, still holding on to your values, hoping that one day the world will acknowledge them. Still believing that your consistency, your emotional honesty, your quiet loyalty will be seen. But the universe isn't keeping score. It's not pausing to notice the effort you're putting in. It's too busy letting wolves tear through the flock while the lambs try to stay pure. In a system that rewards sharp claws and calculated silence, your goodness becomes invisible, or worse, exploited. What if you were never given a fair shot? What if this game you're playing was never meant to reward sincerity? What if the rules were written by people who never had any intention of following them? And here's the twist that hits hardest of all. Maybe the issue isn't that you're not strong enough. Maybe the issue is that you're too principled, too trusting, too human for a world that's not built to honor any of that. Today, you're going to hear a truth that will shake your foundation, but it might just give you back your fire. It's a truth that stings at first, but then clears the fog. It destroys the illusion, but it rebuilds the soul. And by the end, you'll be asking yourself one question that won't leave you alone. Will I keep walking through this battlefield like a lamb waiting for mercy? Or will I finally awaken to the possibility that even lambs can grow teeth? Let me tell you a truth almost no one wants to say out loud, especially not in polite company. Especially not in a world that thrives on keeping people obedient. That idea that being good is enough. It's not wisdom, it's a trap. A beautiful lie designed to keep your fire caged and your power buried. A spiritual sedative disguised as moral advice. It tells you to stay small, to play fair in a game that was never fair, and to expect justice from a world that doesn't even remember the meaning of the word. You were taught that kindness opens doors, that if you work hard, people will notice, that playing by the rules leads to reward, that sowing goodness leads to inevitable recognition. But look around with clear eyes. The highest seats aren't held by the most generous souls. The wealthiest aren't the most selfless. The happiest relationships aren't always the most honest. The game is rigged, not by accident, but by design. And the ones winning are the ones who know how to move in shadows while smiling in the light. The world doesn't operate like some cosmic courtroom where your goodness is tallied up and returned to you in dividends. No, it's a force field arena, a competition of invisible currents, a psychological theater where those who understand performance dominate, while those who cling to pure authenticity often end up watching life from the sidelines. You've seen it. People who lie with ease are praised. People who manipulate with charm are admired. People who promise and never deliver are still applauded. People who steal credit are promoted. People who betray trust are still welcomed at the table. And you keep your promises. You give without expectation. You tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You operate with conscience while the world rewards performance. And instead of rising, you stall, or worse, you shrink, because you've been playing a different game entirely. A game built on the belief that virtue alone is power. But here's the reality. Goodness without strategy is not virtue. It's vulnerability. It's unguarded idealism posing as strength. It's a noble-sounding way to avoid facing the brutal truth. Life isn't fair, and expecting fairness from the unfair is like waiting for a desert to give you water. Do you know what happens when you're good without being wise? You become fuel for other people's ambitions. You become the reliable backup, the silent ladder they climb, the resource they keep returning to, because you never say no. Your kindness becomes your cage. Your honesty becomes a map others use to outmaneuver you. Your loyalty becomes leverage in someone else's strategy. Because in this world, your goodness isn't seen as noble, it's seen as useful. Your generosity isn't admired, it's exploited. Your sincerity isn't respected, it's predicted. And still, you wonder why the world never reflects back the same energy you give. Why your emotional scars deepen even as you try to heal others. Why your spiritual path feels like it ends in walls while others walk highways paved with half-truths and smiling masks. You keep asking what you're doing wrong, when maybe the problem isn't what you're doing, but what you're refusing to see. There's a cost to being good that no one talks about. It's not loud. It doesn't scream for attention. It erodes you silently, in the background of your everyday life. It's the invisible tax you pay every time you choose peace over truth. Every time you say yes, when your entire body is aching to say no. Every time you swallow your truth to avoid being difficult. That's not nobility. That's self-betrayal. And every time you do it, a part of your inner strength withers, slowly, but certainly. The cruelest irony. You think you're staying true to yourself. You think being good is being authentic. But what if the self you're defending is just a version of you sculpted to please others? What if you've been living someone else's definition of goodness? One that keeps you tame, agreeable, and easy to digest. You've been loyal to an image of yourself that was never fully yours. You've been performing a role, playing the saint, hoping the world notices a purity it was never looking for in the first place. And the consequences? They show up everywhere. At work, you're the one who picks up the slack without credit, the one who stays late while others leave early, the one who covers for mistakes, fixes problems, and never asks for recognition. In relationships, you're the one who gives until there's nothing left to give. The one who listens but is never heard. The one who forgives betrayal after betrayal, but never receives a single honest apology. You're the stable one, the strong one, the one they all count on until they don't need you. And your dreams, they're gathering dust on a shelf labeled someday. You've postponed your vision, your mission, your calling, always just for now, always until they're okay, always until things calm down. But things never calm down. And while you've been busy tending to everyone else's fires, your own has turned to embers. You've traded your purpose for the illusion of peace. You've redirected your energy toward causes that weren't yours. You've silenced your truth so others could feel more comfortable in their own lies. Your goodness has become your drug. And the people around you, they're addicted to your availability. They count on your compliance. And deep down, you crave their approval. It's a toxic feedback loop. They take, you give. They grow, you shrink. They shine, you fade. Everyone gets something out of it, except you. And here's the part that cuts the deepest. Some part of you already knew. You felt the weight in your chest, the quiet ache, the invisible resentment. You've seen the red flags and convinced yourself they were your fault. You knew your kindness was being mistaken for weakness. You knew you were being drained. And yet, you kept pretending that being good would eventually pay off, that staying soft would earn you something real. But the ache in your chest isn't nostalgia. It's your spirit, pounding from the inside, demanding to be set free. It's the roar behind your silence. It's your true voice, muffled but alive, pushing against the walls of this spiritual cage you've built with good intentions and quiet self-denial. It's the fire of your authentic self, begging to burn again. Every time you say yes to comfort over truth, another part of your inner warrior dies. Every time you choose harmony over integrity, you drift further from your real strength. And every day you try to be good in a way that costs you your soul, you become less of who you truly are and more of who the world trained you to be. Carl Jung once said something that will haunt you in the best possible way. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And maybe that's exactly what's been happening to you. Maybe your recurring defeats aren't signs of weakness, but signs of a power you've never fully claimed. Not because you don't have it, but because you've buried it, suppressed it, disowned the part of you that knows how to protect what matters, the part that knows how to say no, how to fight, how to confront. Jung called it the shadow. And no, it's not the villain within you. It's not evil. It's simply the side you've never allowed to speak, the part that knows how the game really works, the instincts you've labeled dangerous, the anger you've mistaken for sin, the ambition you've buried under false humility. You don't need to become bad. You need to become whole. You don't need to embrace cruelty. You need to integrate strength. Because here's the truth. Only those who know their darkness can truly choose the light. You keep losing because you keep showing up with only half your power. You're playing chess using just the white pieces, while your opponent is using the full board. You're walking into battles with nothing but your open heart, while the world is armored, armed, and unflinching. You think your goodness alone will be enough to survive, but life isn't a sanctuary, it's a storm. And pretending otherwise doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. Every time someone manipulates you, it's not just their strategy that succeeds, it's your unclaimed shadow that allows it. Every betrayal you didn't see coming was whispered by the part of you you refused to listen to. Every moment you were used was enabled by your own refusal to recognize the game being played. Not because you're naive, but because your light has been trained to reject the very tools that could protect it. And there's someone else you need to hear from now. A man often misunderstood, dismissed as cold, but who understood the machinery of power better than anyone. Niccolo Machiavelli. He didn't teach evil, he taught realism. He didn't ask leaders to become monsters, he warned them about the ones already out there. His truth still stands today. The good man who fails to recognize the malice of others will always be at their mercy. Machiavelli wasn't telling you to become ruthless, he was telling you to be strategic. Because goodness without strength is not virtue, it's vulnerability. Virtue without intelligence is not holiness, it's self-sabotage. In a world of wolves, being a lamb is not noble, it's dangerous. It's not innocence, it's helplessness, dressed up in purity. And here's the beautiful, brutal secret. Jung and Machiavelli were saying the same thing, just from different ends of the human spectrum. One from the soul, one from the system. Jung says, integrate your shadow. Machiavelli says, understand the shadows of others. Together, they teach one truth. Real power comes from clarity, inner and outer. From knowing your full self, from understanding the terrain, from playing the real game, not the one you were taught as a child. The complete man is not the one who only chooses light. He is the one who could destroy, but chooses to build. He is the one who has teeth, but bares them only when it counts. He is capable of rage, but acts from grounded clarity. He can lie, but chooses truth. He can dominate, but chooses to serve with dignity and strength. Now imagine, just imagine, what your life could look like if you stepped into that version of yourself. If you were kind, but no longer a doormat. Generous, but no longer drained. Honest, but no longer exposed. Loving, but no longer disarmed. Noble, but no longer sacrificial. That's not corruption. That's evolution. That's what emotional and spiritual maturity look like. Not purity, not perfection, integration. It's the transformation from passive idealist to wise warrior, from wounded dreamer to lucid leader, from invisible martyr to a man who finally stands in his full presence. Because in the end, real power is never about dominating others. It's about no longer abandoning yourself. Here's what no one told you. You don't need to stop being good. You need to stop being naive. You don't need to become a villain. You need to become whole. You don't need to betray your values. You need to defend them with wisdom. You don't need to stop loving. You need to learn how to love in ways that make you stronger, not smaller. It's not your kindness that's hurting you. It's your lack of boundaries around it. It's your unwillingness to channel your fire. And this is how it looks in real life, not in theory. You start saying no without over-explaining. Not because you're heartless, but because your time and energy are sacred. You help people who actually need help, not the ones who just want to bleed you dry. You give your love to those who value it, not those who see it as disposable. You share your presence with people who respect it, not those who treat it like background noise. You become someone who smiles, but knows when to show teeth. Someone who forgives, but doesn't forget. Someone who loves deeply, but also walks away when love is weaponized. Someone who trusts, but verifies. Someone whose heart is open, but whose soul has walls where they're needed. This is the beginning of your true power. Not power over others. Power within yourself. The power to choose instead of constantly reacting. The power to say, I matter too. The power to protect your peace without feeling guilty for it. The power to guard your inner sanctuary instead of leaving the door wide open for anyone to walk through. In ancient cultures of this continent, the most honored warrior wasn't the most violent one. It was the one who could wield destruction, but chose construction. The one who had access to rage, but practiced restraint. The one who could fight, but preferred to build, to create, to guide. His strength wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, psychological. It was choice anchored in clarity. That's who you're meant to be. Not the lamb waiting to be spared. The warrior who chooses light, not because he doesn't know darkness, but because he's faced it and refused to become it. The lion who became peaceful, not because he forgot how to hunt, but because he no longer needed to prove anything. Your goodness, backed by strength, becomes intelligent compassion. Your generosity, protected by clarity, becomes self-respect. Your honesty, sharpened by experience, becomes powerful truth. Your nobility, reinforced with vision, becomes real leadership. You become someone who doesn't need to roar to be heard. Someone who can be fierce, but prefers peace. Someone who can be cold, but chooses warmth. This is not about being strong instead of good. It's about being both, fully. This is about integrating your fire and your tenderness, your logic and your love, your truth and your edge, not to become someone else, but to finally become yourself, the version of you that was waiting behind all the pretending, the version that doesn't need to sacrifice who he is just to feel seen. The world doesn't need more obedient martyrs. It needs grounded warriors of light, people who remember how to love without losing themselves, who can forgive without forgetting what they've learned, who can give without going empty, who can lead without seeking applause. When you integrate your shadow, you don't become dangerous, you become complete. When you understand power, you don't become corrupted, you become free. When you learn to protect yourself, you don't become harder, you become softer, with the right people, at the right time, for the right reasons. Because now, finally, you've reclaimed the right to choose. Being good was never your flaw. But being unguarded in a world like this, that's what cost you. Being good doesn't mean being weak. Being good means choosing what's right, even when you know how to destroy. Being good means protecting what's sacred. It means having a warrior's heart beneath a poet's soul. It means becoming someone the world can trust, not because you're harmless, but because you're powerful and disciplined enough to direct that power with love. So ask yourself this now. Are you done being the lamb who prays the wolves will change? Are you ready to become the wolf who chose the path of light because he knew the dark but refused to kneel to it? Are you ready to awaken the warrior you've silenced for too long? The one who's been waiting, buried beneath years of self-betrayal and soft-spoken pain. The inner path you've been searching for. It doesn't lead to being more good. It leads to being more complete. And to be complete means to hold both your tenderness and your fire, your silence and your roar, your instinct to serve, and your divine right to be respected. To be complete means honoring not just the saint in you, but the protector. Not just the lover, but the guardian. Not just the listener, but the voice that finally says, enough. Today marks something more than a shift. It marks your return. The day you stop being the man who gives endlessly and receives crumbs. The man who forgives everything but never receives truth. The man who builds others' dreams while his own wither in silence. This is the day you stop waiting to be seen and choose to stand in who you are. And if you've made it this far, if these words cracked something open in you, then it's already begun. The awakening, the shift, the remembrance. You've already started walking the path, not as a victim of your kindness, but as a commander of your clarity. You've begun reclaiming your energy, your presence, your voice, not for revenge, not for ego, but for alignment. Now speak it into existence. Say it, type it, own it. I am the wolf with a heart of light. Say it not as a slogan, but as a declaration of rebirth. Because you're not here to be spared. You're here to lead with soul, to protect with strength, to love with precision, to shine with discernment. The world doesn't need more sacrificial lambs. It needs warriors of light, men who can walk through shadows without becoming them, men who can see the lie and still choose truth, men who remember that protecting the sacred sometimes means knowing exactly where to draw the line. Your purpose was never perfection. Your purpose was wholeness. And to be whole is to stop apologizing for your power, to stop negotiating your worth, to stop shrinking so others feel comfortable, to rise, sharp, soft, steady, and claim both your ability to give and your right to receive. The lamb in you is still part of you, but now he walks beside the wolf, not to attack, not to dominate, but to guard what's holy, to lead where others follow, to build what others destroy, to remember who you are before the world convinced you to forget. So now, the question isn't whether you're good enough. The question is, are you ready to be good in the way that actually matters? The era of shrinking is over. The age of the lucid warrior has begun.